Okay,
I think we're
cool. Welcome to May I Ask a Question Live.
For the next 30 minutes, we're going to do something like the May I Ask a Question live stream, which was started about a year and a half ago by myself and a developer named Chris Manson, who's unfortunately not able to attend EmberCamp today. But what we would do for that live stream is pick a question off of Stack Overflow, and regardless of whether we knew the answer or not, whether we were practiced in the thing that we were about to show, we would launch into it and see what happens, all the while taking some questions from people who had dialed into our live stream. So over the next 30 minutes, that's what we're going to do for all of you.
So my name is Preston. I work at CrowdStrike. They're at the red table in the back. You should totally apply, even if you're not looking for a job, because they're really cool. Other big important things about me, I really like StarCraft, swing dancing. I'm chaotic good, lawful good, depending. Yeah.
And I'm Jen Weber. I'm an engineer at Cardstack, where I'm working to help build a full-stack application framework that helps more people use the web, not just developers, in order to build something awesome. I'm also on the Ember Core Team, and particularly spend most of my time on learning resources.
Cool. So who here has used Ember for at least 6 months? Show of hands.
Hold them up, hold them up, hold them up. Okay, good. All right.
Cool. So
to kick off, I would like, oh yeah, sorry, you can put your hand down now. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Leave it up.
You'll need that energy later for asking more questions. To start us off, I would like everyone to turn to one or more of their neighbors, and not too loud because we need to rein it back in when we're done, but tell them a question that you Googled for in web development over the last week.
Does it have to go bare?
No.
Yes.
All right. Let's bring it back down. Bringing it back down. Okay, so those of you who managed to rattle off a question quickly, raise your hand if your search included something to do with Stack Overflow answers. Oh my goodness. All right, there's a couple. Yeah, Yeah, all right. So we want to talk a little bit about what it's like to use Stack Overflow.
So there are a lot of questions on Stack Overflow.
And over 23,351 are about Ember.js. Now, I have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Ember guides because I spend so much time looking at them, but when people are especially first learning Ember, or they're trying to do something different than they're used to, a lot of their searches are going to bring them to Stack Overflow.
In the last 7 days, 66% of the Ember questions are unanswered. Now, a question may actually have an answer but not be accepted, or the answer may be in a comment and not like an official answer. So across all time on the Ember.js tag, 27% of the questions are unanswered. And there are a couple contributing things to that. There are a good number of people looking for unanswered questions throughout history to answer to get those sweet, sweet karma points. And over time, as more and more new questions appear that are answered in comments, this number is expected to increase. We could close questions, but that could affect searchability, and maybe something about the way the duplicate is phrased will help a future searcher find the answer quicker.
So these statistics are normal amongst other JavaScript frameworks. So in some ways, some cases, we're actually doing better.
All right, but a lot of common questions will need new answers when Octane comes out. the latest code style won't be available for copy-paste, which I don't know about you, but that's the only way I code. Sorry, Elias.
So if you saw, you were watching closely Jessica's talk earlier, you probably saw at least a little bit of code that seemed unfamiliar to you. And that's going to be the case for a little while when you start to Google things and you're hoping to find that Octane version. So to address this issue, we're going to engage in death-defying feats of live coding. All of the experienced presenters who I've ever asked for advice, almost all of them, have said to me, Jen, do not do live coding. It is a bad time. So I brought Preston. Anyway, so along the way, we hope that you learn something about how to approach questions you don't know the answer to, how to write your own questions, and something about Ember Octane. Now, we're doomed because we're going to make mistakes. So who's going to save us? All of you. So, for this segment.
Yeah, so the live part of this is, we want you to interrupt us. We want you to heckle us. We want you to tell us what we're doing wrong. We're going to be live coding a Stack Overflow answer using Octane features. You can ask questions. You can provide answers. You can just totally interrupt and derail everything in any way you see fit. And just like the live stream, this is totally unscripted. Jen and I have spent all of 1 second looking at the Stack Overflow question. We're like, yeah, that one. So
yeah, let's give it a try. All right, so I'll tell you a little bit about the development environment while Preston's getting set up. We're going to be using VS Live Code while we're working on this. And we have already generated an Ember app using Ember Octane, which is currently in a preview. By that, I mean it's not yet the stable release of Ember. However, in 3.13 is when Octane features are going to be available in that stable release. And in Ember 3.14, for newly generated apps, they're going to become the default. Do you want to take us through this question?
Yeah, so this person is wanting to know how to send action to route. They have two components, one sitting in another, and they want to send an event from the main route from child components, and both components are in that same route. And they have this nice little MS Paint diagram. They need to click the button and somehow bubble up an action. So they want to know a standard way to do that. Now, there's an existing answer that does this. This is maybe you're probably used to this. You got this action helper. Maybe you've seen the route action add-on. And there's a bunch of information here about it, a bunch of stuff about closures. We're going to ignore that because we like Octane.
Yeah, and this question is from about 2 years ago, but it's something that developers who are working on Octane are going to need to have a handle on.
Yeah. So we have our Ember app right here. We have a empty template, and here it is running. So they have two components. So I'll just start by naming component A and open a terminal. And generate component A.
So in Octane, we're going to be getting 2 files. You might be used to getting 3, your JavaScript file, your handlebars file, and your test. But when you type Ember generate component, you might notice that it's missing the component JavaScript file.
Yep, and let's say you need that file. There are some flags. You can throw on GC for Glimmer component. and it'll be like, hey, these two already exist. Let's give you some JavaScript there.
So the reasoning behind this is that components come in lots of different shapes, flavors, and use cases. And the one thing that unites all of them is that they are going to need a template. So you might potentially, in your app, if you started to use components in the Octane style of things, you might still have some classic components. That's the term we're using for pre-Octane components. That's the ones that extend from Ember object. Those can hang out in your app as well. You can continue to generate those, but you can also generate these Glimmer components. I'm using a lot of air quotes here because Glimmer components, you might have heard of Glimmer as a standalone web component framework in the past, but it's also an important part of Ember's rendering engine, and now something that's available as an API for our components.
So I'm just going right on ahead and generating the second component with all the files with this flag, and I have an extra dash, so just ignore that. So yeah, so I got component A dot hibs rendering component B, and in here we want a button, which on click we want to do a thing. Oh, yeah, we will get there. All right, so my component B. So in order to make an action, we need to import the action decorator. And for all intents and purposes, this binds the this of, hey man.
Ember components come in many shapes and flavors. Robert.
No, fixed. Thanks. No, I can't do force, like, right? Yeah. All right. So for now, we'll do that. And then going back to here. Oh, look, actions is not defined. This is exciting. Let's see what I did. Oh, yeah.
Action. There we go.
Ba-boom.
So that at action syntax that you see there is something known as a decorator. And it's not something that Ember itself made up, but it's a way that you can kind of label things within your class in order to give them new behaviors and abilities.
Yeah, so going up a level, we want to now pass an action. I don't use VS Code normally, so apologies for the abomination that is my indentation. Okay, so now in components a bloop, we want to say do something. I think that's what I called it.
So if you've started using angle bracket invocation for your components, this might look familiar to you. We are referencing our action that is defined on this component with the this, and we're saying, hey, when we pass this in as an argument, we want to call that argument do something when we're using it in the consuming application. Who here has tried using angle brackets for their components? Okay, cool. So most everybody here. If you haven't, it's good to know that for the most part, things continue to work the same when you're invoking a classic component, but as we mentioned before, Glimmer components have different abilities.
Yep. Okay, So now we have that. Next is the open. We decided open editors was a good idea. Okay, and then so there's interesting thing about actions and routes. You can do this. You can write this on a route. It's not going to be callable from your template, though.
Yep.
So what do we do? Yeah, I like that. Oh, what? Man, I should thank him for that foresight. All right, so model, return the action.
Oh, that's interesting. A more canonical way of handling this, in an Ember app would be to put your actions on the controller. So just as we were passing them through our components, we could put the actions on the controller for this route and pass them through just the same as we did with our nested components.
Okay. So, what did I call this? The action. What? Who said that? No. Personally, I have a beef with them. But if controllers work for you.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is the beta. Yeah. Okay. So this is going to component A, and then as everyone knows, data down, actions up. We can do that, and I am continually forgetting the name of this. Okay, and then in component B.
So now that we've brought up data down, actions up, one, you might be thinking as you're looking at this that there's not much that's terribly different than what you might be used to with classic components that inherit from Ember objects. Like, okay, we're using native classes for that JavaScript file, but what else is different here? When you're working with these components that inherit from Glimmer instead of Ember objects, data down, actions up is more strictly enforced. So if your parent component has some value and it passes it to a child component, that child component is not able to modify the parent's value if it is indeed a Glimmer component.
Cool. So should we demonstrate that next or just answer the question? Okay.
I think so.
Cool.
Speaking of which, oh yeah, a question. Does that include deep object cloning as well?
Let's find out. Okay, so starting at the route, we're going to make some data, and we're going to make this some nested stuff.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then passing this to component A.
While you're passing that down, I'll also mention that it will be very common for people who are working with existing apps who want to start using some of these features. It'll be very common that they're going to have classic components and Glimmer components that are living together in the same app. And a new Octane style component might actually reference and use a classic component. That classic component that inherits from Ember objects gets to do all of the things that it's used to being able to do. It's allowed to do things like change the values of things that have been passed into it. So things such as the input components will continue to work. If you've written your own input component, that's probably going to continue to work even if you've called it from a component that is inheriting from Glimmer, aka Glimmer components.
Well, we got to see what happens. Okay, I think. Right. But just to prove that. Yeah.
Wow. You attempted to set class component. A component extends data on a component's arguments. Component arguments are immutable and cannot be updated directly. They always represent the values that are passed to your component. So as you're on your, That's nice, yeah. So as you're on your learning journey of starting to try out some of these features, there will be some handy guides to help you along the way.
Okay, so just kind of double checking what I set this nested stuff to. Okay, first key is A. So we're going to mutate the A object on the args, or try to. Oh. There we go. Yeah, it was the wrong thing. Okay, so the args object is a proxy. So how do we get to what's in there?
Maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the real answer.
I think what we should do instead is provide. Well.
Oh, yeah. Well. Okay, so this is definitely a bug if you find code that does this. Not a bug with Ember, because this is just how JavaScript works in general. You cannot freeze a object deeply. So we set A on that nested object, and we lost the nested objects B and C. Yeah. So this is a proxy.
So let's say that we were not trying to break the way that Ember and Glimmer components work. One of the ways that we might do this is instead of trying to mutate the arguments, we could pass in an action from the parent that kind of has the permission and scope in order to change the parent arguments. All right, so far, who is confused? A few people are confused. Are there any questions? This is called May I Ask a Question, and you may. Yes, Matt. That is a great question. The question was, why can we not use the action helper that uses a string in the top level component? I don't know. You can.
Yeah,
all right.
So, what did I call that, man? Short-term memory loss. Okay. Another thing.
No wonder.
Actually, I need the action. Yeah. So, to deconfuse myself, let's call this controller action.
Yeah. Sure. All right, so we'll generate a controller. And when we open up this controller, one of the things that we'll see is that it is using native JavaScript classes. Now, let's suppose that your engineering organization is not all about, you gotta schedule that lunch session where everybody goes over, here's how native JavaScript classes work. And you didn't get to that yet. The good news is that your existing application, when you upgrade to versions like 3.14 or later, your generators are going to keep working the same. When we're seeing all this different stuff, this is what happens when we've started a fresh app that has some special flags set on it that say, hey, use these new generators that give us native classes.
Yeah, and the last thing that needs to happen here is that the action passed to component A needs to be invoked, and I'll just make a little button here to do that. Okay. Ta-da.
Very nice.
All right. So, and then we originally wanted to mutate the data thing. So instead of, let's see here. So the Stack Overflow question wanted to change data from deep within their component tree.
Mhm. That's true.
We'll say the act or desire of mutating data is whatever they're trying to do.
We'll take some creative license with this question, but it's a good point.
Okay.
So Preston has a lot of this already in his head from having worked on applications that are early adopters of these development patterns. I myself don't have that muscle memory yet. I imagine most of you don't as well. So the Ember guides, as well as we're providing some cheat sheets that show you, like, hey, if I did this thing using classic Ember, how would I convert this into Octane? So that you don't have to know off the top of your head where to import action from. You can look it up and copy and paste it, which is the spirit of Stack Overflow. And development, yes.
Okay, so this, the args, the on-change. Okay. Oh, look at that. Anybody catch what I forgot to do?
Rename something?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, you got a spelling error.
Oh, no.
Oh no. The mob programming. It's working.
Woo. So, now, that doesn't actually prove anything because we're not displaying the data anywhere. So,
The foresight.
oh yeah. Let's go this dot data equals. There's new data being passed. And we need some way to track this data thing. So tracked is a pretty cool little thing here.
Who's used tracked already? Anybody tried it out? Cool. So tracked is where you might have used computed properties in the past, where the computed property, you've got to say, hey, computed property, watch the values of these things. Instead, now we can label the things that need to be watched as tracked, and then whatever needs to update based on that just kind of happens. I'm way oversimplifying. There's a lot going on behind the scenes there, but from the end user experience perspective, it's pretty smooth.
Okay, and then what do we? Okay, so this is the last place where the.
Oh.
What? Oh, yeah, I agree. But the question.
So the comment there was, Robert said you shouldn't keep mutable state on the routes.
Oh, really?
Oh, a tracked property on the routes template will not, or a tracked property on the route will not update on the routes template. All right. This further confirms that I was, glad we focused on components first.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
oh, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Oh, I would not encourage that. I mean, you could put it on. a comment, and then we can flag inappropriate behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So. Yeah, and that's a good segue into what makes a good Stack Overflow answer.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to talking about what you think is the solution to their specific problem, you can try to nudge them towards a better pattern or some community standard that they'll find more of on the internet in their searching. Well, not in those words. but yes. So yeah.
So I think we're actually at the point where we need to jump into questions.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Because we got till when? 3:30? What time? Can I see this real quick? Yeah.
You've got till 3:35.
3:35. All right. Yeah. So I think let's go ahead and wrap this up. We're not going to write out the answer here, but yeah, pretend that we did, and we'll talk a little bit about what makes a good answer before we wrap up. But we want to make sure we have enough questions, enough time for actual questions. So I saw there were a couple hands earlier. Is there anyone who still has an immediate burning question about what they saw live coded today? All right.
We also had a little announcement for writing down things on these paper things over here in case people are too shy to speak up in front of a crowd. So that's pretty cool. So this first question is, now there are no stupid questions. Everyone's coming from different places of knowledge, and you don't know what you don't know, and associations can be made in funny ways. So how is Octane different from Ajax? So Octane is an edition of Ember, coming out in 3.14, and Ajax is kind of this like blanket term for asynchronous data fetching. The name, I think, was popularized by jQuery, now superseded by Fetch, which is native in browsers. So
yep, and Ajax is something that you could use inside of Octane if you had installed and enabled jQuery.
Yep.
Which is not included by default when you generate a new Octane app.
Yep.
All right. That's a popular
yeah,
feature.
down with jQuery.
Will Embroider be ready for Octane?
Ed?
I defer to Ed. Ed says no. However, if you want to try out Embroider in the meantime, that's something that you can separately experiment with and be one of the people who helps to iron out any remaining bugs in that library. Yeah. So for everyone else, right now, actually getting Octane out and having it be polished is the priority, but Embroider is something that can be the focus after that.
Yep, we're actually shipping. So how do we promote Ember? Yeah, so React's pretty big, Vue's pretty big, Angular is backed by Google, which is giant. I think the best way to do this is to talk about our success with Ember and how stable it makes our work lives. Like, you can go anywhere on the internet and talk about people being afraid of rewriting their apps, and a bunch of other people saying don't do that. But in Ember, everything is incremental. Like, you may or may not know that, but if you like pull on your experiences and how Ember has saved you time, as you upgrade throughout the years. I think if we can get that across in a nice way, that's one of our better ways to promote Ember right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Without Big Bang, without...
Yep. So that was the comment there was steady, incremental, and constant improvement over time without Big Bang features. So you might be thinking like, hey, the stuff that Preston wrote looks an awful lot different than what's in my app. But the good news is that you can incrementally adopt those features. Things are backwards compatible, and a lot of effort has been put into making it so that something as cool and important as Octane is able to be released as a minor release and not something that's going to break all of your apps. Yeah. Yep. So the comment there was the Octane edition is also a signal to the broader JavaScript community that like, hey, now is a good time to check out Ember. There's some good new stuff here. And so I know I'm going to be trying to give a public talk or something at some of my local JavaScript meetups, and I think that's really one of the best ways to help grow our community.
Yeah, Octane's all native JavaScript, so you can go to a JavaScript meetup and be like, hey, look at this thing that's no longer esoteric and written in 2011. Like, it's just JavaScript now with decorators.
Yeah.
People don't like extend.
All right, so when will angle brackets support nested components? What are its current workarounds? Angle brackets do support nested components as of 3.10, somewhere in there.
And if you're on an older version, you can use Ember, angle bracket, invocation, polyfill.
Ah, yes. So there's a polyfill available back through 2.10 for nested components, and you can check out the API docs for the syntax. It just uses 2 colons instead of a slash in the file path name. All right.
When are routable components going to drop?
All right, I have an answer for this one.
Yeah.
I think this is a troll.
It could be.
If you've been holding, yeah, if you've been holding out for routable components, you should let that go. And instead use some of the features of Ember that kind of supersede the need for that. So to give an example, we've got things like the router service that let you transition to other routes from basically almost anywhere in your application, and you should look to those features.
There's also a couple RFCs out there to discuss something that a few people reminds them of routable components but isn't. So comment on those.
Yep. How do you go from intermediate to expert Ember developer?
Write lots of code, make lots of mistakes, ask for help. That's
I would add,
my strat.
if you have the time and ability, participating in open source is a good opportunity to learn from people who are more experienced than you at whatever you want to know. That was definitely my inroad into the Ember community and how I learned a lot of the things that I know today.
Also diving into the framework itself. Like sometimes you get an error and you get a weird stack trace. Like, just go for it. Spelunk.
All right, back to slides.
Oh.
Yep.
Computer, no.
Oh no, it went to sleep. Bad timing. Oh,
Yeah.
That was that nap time that we all missed out on earlier because James stayed awake. Oh no. Okay, so while we're pulling that back up again, we talked about Stack Overflow. What makes a good question? If you haven't engaged on Stack Overflow before, try it out sometime. Try to give a description of the problem. Say what you expected or wish should happen, what is currently happening, how what you're experiencing is different from what you expected, the things that you've tried, and then provide as much code as you possibly can to give context for other people to answer. Then what makes a good answer? Stack Overflow, it's been around for so long that like one of the main problems is that the versions that we see all of the software going through, there's not a super great way to sort through those things. So whenever you ask a question, or whenever you answer a question, say what version your answer applies to, give links to the docs copy in your examples. Don't just link to a gist, because maybe you're going to delete that gist later and that answer will be lost. Copy your answer into the question, and most importantly, be empathetic. All of us are constantly learning every day. All of us started as beginners in things, you know, multiple times per year, and so be gentle and be kind when you are working with other people. So you might be thinking like, I haven't really participated in Stack Overflow before. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can upvote when you see a good answer. This helps raise things that people have taken lots of time to write up to the top. You can ask questions, you can answer them, and you can add your own comments as well. So for me, I think doing Q&A like this, you know, what's the benefit? You could do it out of altruism, out of the goodness of your heart of wanting to help other people, and the warm fuzzies that come from that are super great. But it's also an incredible way to build your own skills, maybe build your reputation as a developer, and try out some things that you wouldn't have otherwise done before.
Yeah. I mean, participate a lot on Discord, too. Lots of good conversations there.
Yep. All right. So a couple thanks. I'd like to thank Chris Manson, who is not able to be here today, but is one of the people who helped come up with this idea and did a bunch of live streams with me in the past. I'd like to thank all of the people who take time already to answer questions on Stack Overflow. And then also, in a way, the Stack Overflow team has provided a way for us to make these questions searchable. So thanks to them as well. And with that,
yeah, I'm Preston Sego, Novox Populi, if I hadn't put that together, and I work for CrowdStrike. You should come work with me.
And I'm Jen Weber. I work at Cardstack. You should come work with me.
Yeah, work for me.
And thanks for listening.